Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having outstanding Wednesdays wherever across this great nation you may be. It's College Football Signing Day Part 2. I'm going to run through all the top classes for you. I'm going to talk about the State of the Union last night by Donald Trump. And I'm going to talk about the wild, wacky, unbelievable situation in the state of Virginia right now where the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the attorney general are all potentially going to be forced to resign. I don't even know who's number 4, who would be the next man up for the throne. And we're going to talk about our good friend Jemele Hill. When last we discussed her, she was saying that Donald Trump was a white supremacist. Last night during the State of the Union, she decided to tweet some sort of comment that implies that Donald Trump should be assassinated. We'll dive into that all as well. Plus, it's a good point. Elizabeth Warren used to announce on her bar card in the state of Texas that she was a Native American. So she has now apologized for claiming to be a Native American after her ill-fated DNA test release, which is going down as one of the stupidest things that has ever occurred in presidential politics. Pow Wow Chow was the name of the book that she wrote for. I mean, it's unbelievable. All these Democrats with these huge skeletons in their in their closets. You would think that maybe they would have been a little bit more lenient about other people, but of course, that is not the case. So let's start with College Football Signing Day. And then we got a bunch of different fun stories, and we can have some fun with all of those. But College Football Signing Day not officially done. There are still some guys that can be added. But here is what the top 10 and beyond is going to look like. Let me go ahead and break it down for you. Bama's going to finish with the #1 overall class. It's going to be the best recruiting class probably that Nick Saban has ever produced in the history of his time at Alabama, which is pretty unbelievable. Pretty unbelievable when you think about how in this situation right now with the #1 overall recruiting class is an extraordinary performance. There's no other way to classify it, all right? Georgia's going to finish second. Got a couple of big flips today. Kirby Smart on a roll. 5 stars according to the 24/7 composite rankings. All right, hold on a sec too. I use the 24/7 recruiting class composite rankings, okay? Inevitably, when I tweet out these rankings or I mention them, one of you noobs out there is running around saying, well, according to this site, I use the 24/7 composite because it averages every major recruiting site out there, all right? So that way, it's not biased in one form or another. That is, I think, the most reliable possible place to use. So that is what I'm citing right now. I'm at Bama 1, Georgia 2, Texas sliding in number 3. Okay, cool, hook 'em. Big run for Tom Herman here. Texas A&M's in the 4 spot. That's one of the best classes A&M's ever had. Maybe the best class, I believe, close to it that A&M's ever had. LSU always recruits well. They are right now in the 5 spot. Oklahoma in the 6. We've got Oregon in 7th place. Really good class and what is otherwise shaping up to be a really weak Pac-12 recruiting class. Really spectacular class being put together in Oregon right now. We got Michigan at 8, which is kind of low for Jim Harbaugh. Florida has surged up to 9 right now. Clemson's at 10. Mediocre class for Clemson, relatively speaking. Penn State at 11. Auburn at 12. Tennessee at 13. Notre Dame at 14. Ohio State at 15. Some of you knuckleheads out there are going to complain. Ohio State doesn't have a full recruiting class. Florida State at 16. USC, really bad recruiting class, by historic standards for SC, sliding in at 17. Washington 18, conversely, a good class for Washington. South Carolina 19. Nebraska 20, really the first full class of Scott Frost, just an okay class. Stanford 21, phenomenal class for Stanford. Ole Miss 22, Arkansas 23, Mississippi State 24, and Purdue slides in at number 25. Big-time programs probably surprise you how low they are. Miami 28, Although they did sign, if you saw that dude, a punter who's got so many tattoos and looks so old, an Australian punter. He's 45 years old. Kentucky coming off a really good year for them, all the way down at 34. Missouri 36. And that is basically the totality of the big-time top 50, all right? That is the breakdown. That's the 24/7 recruiting composite class rankings. Pretty phenomenal collection of talent all over, and that is where we are right now. All right, State of the Union address. I thought Donald Trump did a phenomenal job yesterday in his State of the Union address. I watched the entire 1.5 hours. I loved everything about it. I loved the open. You guys know who have been regular viewers of this show that a couple of years ago I got to go to Normandy, and I spent all day touring the beaches of Normandy, and it was one of the most impressive days of my life in terms of how sobering, overwhelming, majestic, humbling, basically every positive adjective you can think of. It was unbelievable, the experience of getting to go to see the beaches of Normandy. And to stand there on those cliffs and look out at what those 18-year-olds did as they stepped off of those landing vehicles into the water, sometimes over their head, into literal hells of bullets being fired by Nazis, and storm the beaches there. It's a level of bravery that I think you have to be present at some point in time to see. And so much of Normandy is the exact same setup as it was then. The pictures, it's still farmland. Those French villages still look almost the exact same. I have been obsessed with D-Day and Normandy and World War II ever since I was there. I have to say, if you ever have the opportunity to go tour that location, it is one of the most proud moments you will ever experience as an American and as a member of Western civilization that stood up against the Nazis at that point in time. As I have said many times before, their great-grandfathers stormed the beaches of Normandy. Their great-grandchildren now call people they disagree with on social media Nazis. It really kind of puts into perspective how small the fighting that we do now is. So I love the idea that Donald Trump started off his speech with some of the final survivors of Normandy, those men who were still alive, who were there nearly, 75 years ago now, to storm the beaches of Normandy as kids, 93 years old now, 94, 95, older. It is unbelievable to be able to talk to those gentlemen and to see what they accomplished. I loved the theme. I thought that Trump's address was inspiring. I thought it was uplifting. I thought it was just expertly crafted. I loved opening with those guys and then finishing with that soldier who had helped to liberate that other young man who had been in the concentration camp in I think it was Poland at the time. I got to tell you, there's been a lot of criticism of Donald Trump. I think much of it is justified based on the way that he behaves sometimes on Twitter. But if you actually look at what he has done, as a president, I agree with a lot of the things he did. His corporate tax rate move was great. I think whether you agree, and I don't agree with everything they will put out there, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were both very legitimate choices on the Supreme Court. I think they're going to be outstanding jurists for the next 40 or 50 years. I think much of what Trump has done, I agree with him that immigration is broken. I don't necessarily agree that the way to fix it is with a wall, but I certainly understand the metaphorical power of arguing that a nation needs to enforce its immigration laws in order to have any kind of moral imperative in a larger context, okay? I thought this was the kind of speech he needs to give. He leaned into the economy, talked about the low rate of unemployment for Black, Hispanic, and Asian people in this country, as well as white Americans. I thought he did a fantastic job addressing and picking the people that he was going to emphasize in his address, which every president does. The Mrs. Johnson, I believe her name is, who was used to illustrate, along with another man, the extreme punitive nature at times of our criminal justice system and the need for which we have reform, particularly as it pertains to individuals who've been convicted of crimes of a nonviolent nature. We shouldn't be putting them away for the rest of their life and throwing away the key. We should allow them to redeem themselves and lead better lives, more productive lives as American citizens. I thought that was phenomenal. I thought that using the opportunity, look, I like what Trump has done with North Korea. Even if you don't like Kim Jong-un, I like the fact that they have a relationship such that the nation is not in bigger danger. I like what Trump has done with ISIS. I like the idea of bringing the troops back from Afghanistan. We should not be fighting a perpetual, never-ending war. I never agreed with the decision to go into Iraq to begin with. I saw where we have spent something like $8 trillion fighting wars in other countries. I don't think that is what we should be doing. Now, there are many things that I disagree with Donald Trump on, right? But in the grand scheme of his overall presidency, I think much of it, criticism relating to him, has to do with the way he behaves as opposed to what he actually does, okay? And I think at times he has been way too reactionary and everything else associated with it. Having said that, this was a phenomenal speech. It was a phenomenal speech. It was well organized. It was well written. It was well argued. It was well put together. Even the people who dislike Donald Trump, I saw the immediate flash poll on CNN and on CBS, people who watched for an hour and a half, he got 79% approval on that speech, okay? I also thought the behavior of the women who dressed in white was actually ridiculous, and it made them look small relative to the president. It really did. Even if you hate Trump, showing up dressed all together with sour faces during the speech, refusing to clap for things that are obviously very positive, I thought made them look very bad and very small relative to Trump. It's amazing that Trump's critics have been so unsuccessful that they have somehow made Trump look better, okay? Having said that, I think when you look overall across the entirety, Republican and Democrat, there was one moment that really stood out to me. It's when they decided to sing "Happy Birthday" to the guy who had survived the Holocaust. It sounds trivial and small, but I think when you have face-to-face interaction and you leave behind social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everybody trying to grab likes, your common humanity is shared. Chanting "USA, USA" may be juvenile, but it shows that in general, what we fight about in America is relatively, by and large, small issues. And I wish we would get back to the era where you could disagree with someone, but when you disagreed with someone, you didn't presume that they were also evil. I wish that everybody could be like, you know what, I think you're full of shit on that argument. I think you're an idiot. I think you're an imbecile. But I understand your argument. Let's go grab a beer and hang out. That's how lawyers behave, by the way. That's how lawyers behave when they make arguments in court against each other. You take a side, the other person takes a side, and then afterwards you make the arguments and somebody issues a ruling, somebody wins or loses, and you both go home and have a beer. I think that common humanity has often been lost when people live in their phones and when people are going after the tiny niches that support them. And so as a result, I think we've gotten this grievance political pyramid where everybody's perpetually outraged, where everybody's perpetually angry, and people can't sit back and say, you know what, the unemployment rate's 3.9 or 4%. Real wage growth is growing at a substantial rate. The tax cut, whether you like it or not, has certainly stimulated the economy in general, and it's helped to fix our corporate tax structure, which was badly broken compared to even other socialist countries. And so I like a lot of what Trump has done. I think the message sometimes gets lost in the messenger's excesses, and I think as a result, we've created this system where Donald Trump is either evil or he is the greatest thing on earth. I think he's somewhere in between. I think he's so far been an okay president with the results that he has conveyed. Now, do I get nervous sometimes? What would happen if a true crisis arose? Totally do. What would happen if 9/11 happened today? I think there'd be a lot of people on social media who would blame America if 9/11 happened. The last time I saw this country completely united was post 9/11. I think that that is what could potentially take place. If something like that happened again, I'm not sure America would be unified. All right? Couple of other things. Couple of other things that I want to hit here on the State of the Union. I think that you can criticize Trump for a lot, but he seems to understand the pomp, the circumstance, the majesty of the State of the Union address and put his best foot forward then. I wish he would tweet less and more generically, because I think right now here's his key if he's going to get reelected in 2020. He needs the Democrats to look like crazy people over the next year as they select their nominee over the next 18 months. And he needs to move towards the middle. He needs to look rational and normal because they are going to look ridiculous as they all fight out in their tribe of individual personal identities and try to determine who is going to represent them. I think the guy who can beat him is Joe Biden. Joe Biden would win the Midwest. I think he would beat Trump face-to-face, head-to-head in an election. I don't think the Democrats are going to nominate Joe Biden. I think they're going to lead even more into grievance politics, and as a result, I think they're going to nominate somebody like Kamala Harris, who's going to run against Trump and try to be angry at him. And I don't believe there's room for two angry candidates. So I think this is going to be intriguing to see. All right, the Virginia mess. The Virginia mess, to me, is unbelievable. If you haven't been following this story, this is going to blow your mind. First of all, the governor of Virginia somehow ends up either in a blackface picture or wearing a KKK hood in his medical school yearbook. How that happens, I have no earthly idea. How you even decide to ever run for high elected office if in your background you have a KKK hood picture, or you have crazily enough, a blackface picture in your medical school yearbook. I have no idea. How it never comes out, I have no idea. All of those things. That's crazy in and of itself. Yesterday, I pointed this out, however. I don't believe people should be held prisoner by what they said when they were 20 years old, or 25 years old, or even 30 years old. Because by doing that, especially in a social media age, what you are doing is potentially taking away people who could be eminently qualified and outstanding at holding elective office and saying you can't do this now because of something you did in your past. And I just disagree with that fundamentally. I believe that redemption is always possible. I believe you can apologize for bad mistakes that you have made. I believe that you shouldn't be held prisoner by your past if your future offers better opportunity and possibility for people out there. Period. Okay? I don't think that's a difficult position. I think it would be relatively easy. Okay? Here is something more. The lieutenant governor, who it appears might take over, then makes a decision to somehow issue a statement at 2 a.m. in the night that he has never done anything that is in any way wrong, except that he's been accused of sexual assault, and the Washington Post is researching it. Now, I said this as well. I could do a whole show on this. My position on this is when there are no witnesses, you can't just accept the woman's story and believe it's true. I said that about Brett Kavanaugh. I would say this about this situation as well. However, that story blows up. He then said insulting comments about the woman in insulting comments about the woman in his discussion with his staff about this meeting, about this incident. Then, as if you think there's not enough of a mushroom cloud, the guy who's in the third spot is the Attorney General, and he comes out and says he also wore blackface. How in the world is this possible? That the three highest elected officials in Virginia, you got a white dude in blackface, you got a black guy accused of raping someone, and you got another white guy in blackface. And I'm sitting around here like, how is this possible? Virginia needs to hit the reset button. Virginia needs, I don't even know who's number 4 on the flow chart, but I can only assume that he raped someone while wearing blackface. I mean, that's the way this story's going. We got white guy in blackface. We got a rape allegation. We got another guy in blackface. The only thing that could happen here is number 4 could be accused of raping somebody while wearing blackface. I don't even know where this is going. It's unbelievable. By the way, the first 3 people are all Democrats. Who knows who number 4 is? But Virginia's got some major issues here. All right? This is unbelievable across the board. All right? My position on this is straightforward. You should treat the lieutenant governor as it pertains to the rape charge allegation the same way that you did Brett Kavanaugh. And I said, in the absence of supporting corroboration, you can't just accept the woman's story. That's not the way the judicial system works, but we'll see what ends up happening here. Okay? This is a crazy story. Finally, as if that were not a crazy enough story, we got to finish off here, and this blows my mind. Jemele Hill sent a tweet last night. Jemele Hill sent a tweet last night during the State of the Union suggesting that Donald Trump should be assassinated. You'll remember our friend Jemele Hill, formerly of Woke Center at ESPN. They handed her the franchise at ESPN. She drove it into a ditch. She called Donald Trump a white supremacist, refused to apologize. ESPN refused to hold her accountable, did nothing for that. Then last night, during the State of the Union, she made an assassination joke. Joke is being kind, suggesting that Alexandria, let's see what her name is, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the good-looking young Democrat who just got elected from New York, that she should say, "Get your hand out of my pocket," which was what was said right before Malcolm X was shot. If you remember the assassination of Malcolm X, somebody made a huge scene by saying, "Get your hand out of my pocket." And when that happened, Malcolm X was then shot as everybody was distracted. So Jemele Hill, who is now employed by, unbelievably enough, Jemele Hill, who is now employed by The Atlantic, is making assassination jokes, to be kind, during the State of the Union address. And this story has blown up in a big way. And look, in general, my position is pretty straightforward on this. I don't think anybody should get fired for a tweet. I dislike the idea that you send one tweet and it somehow invalidates years of you for work, right? I don't think that makes any sense at all. But I have to say this. If you are dumb enough to make an assassination comment about the sitting president of the United States, you deserve to be investigated by the Secret Service, and you deserve whatever condemnation rains down upon you. Furthermore, if you are dumb enough to make that comment after you have already provoked the ire of everyone by calling Donald Trump a white supremacist, to me, this further elucidates what is ultimately Donald Trump's greatest gift. That is that his critics are all crazier and more deranged than he is. I don't think Donald Trump's a perfect president. I didn't vote for him. But I think he's pretty okay. You know, there's lots of things every president has done that I don't agree with. I root for all of them to be successful. And what is wild to me is that Trump's critics are actually pushing people like me who are fairly middle of the road and actually disagree with Donald Trump on a lot of issues into his camp. Because I look out there and I say, my God, the people opposed to Donald Trump are crazier than he is. They're out here tweeting assassination comments during his State of the Union that was actually an incredibly good State of the Union that was very middle of the road. And this is why I've said this from the get-go. When you actually look at what Donald Trump has espoused, he is the most liberal Republican to hold office since Teddy Roosevelt. People get lost in the trolling, in the flash, in the substance, in the attitude, in the persona of Donald Trump, and don't actually look at the substance of what he does. The substance is relatively middle of the road. Guys, it ain't far right. It ain't ideological. that totally isolates him from everybody else. Almost no one talks about the fact that Donald Trump, from a social perspective, is the most liberal president to ever be in the White House, going all the way back for Republicans to Teddy Roosevelt. And so when I see people like Jemele Hill behaving like they are, I think what is ultimately the most jarring about it is the lack of sophistication when it comes to understanding how the American political process works, and also the lack of sophistication in comprehending what he is doing in a historical context. That's why I tweeted during this speech, this would be the worst white supremacist speech of all time. The president's grandchildren are Jewish. The president brought in survivors of the massacre in Pittsburgh and specifically and unabashedly ridiculed the idea of anti-Semitism. He specifically acknowledged that some laws can lead to adverse treatment of African Americans based on their race, and pointed out a major law that he has addressed to try to fix it. Okay? All of this is major, easy to research. People get lost in all the flair, the pomp, the circumstance of Donald Trump, and they don't actually look at the substance. The tweets blind them, and their own rage drives them insane. It's wild. I don't understand it at all. It drives me insane sometimes, and it's pushing me more and more into where I think only rational people can dwell, which is in the idea that the country has lost its mind. I also loved Buzz Aldrin, by the way. Buzz Aldrin still looks like a badass as they saluted the fact that we went to the moon 50 years ago. It's phenomenal. So that is my analysis. If you enjoyed this show, share it with your friends. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about college football signing day, the State of the Union, the Virginia governor mess, and Jemele Hill and her assassination tweet. That salute was clutch from Buzz Aldrin. That was a clutch salute from Buzz Aldrin. I love all of you. I'm going to block this guy who said we never went to the moon. I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis. Kisses. DBAP, boys and girls, unless you need to SBAP. I'll see you guys soon. Love you. Thank you, Facebook. See y'all.